Hi, everyone. My name is Shomo, and today I'm going to talk about doing reproducible research in R. Now, R isn't the only programming language, but it's something that I have some familiarity with. And lots of people, especially in bioinformatics and statistics and epidemiology, use it a lot. And I think it complements Python in very unique ways. And all of you have, or at least some of you will be familiar with Python, perhaps less so with R. So I thought I would just take a few minutes to walk you through some resources that I have built on teaching you reproducible research in R. Now, all of the lecture notes, this particular video, code, synthetic data, templates for reproducing whatever I have said is actually available on a GitHub repository. I'll put a link to this at the end of this video. But if you go to that repository, you'll be able to find all these resources. So this talk essentially is also reproducible in a way. So let's get started. I will just walk some of you through some of my slides, and then I'll show you some code, and then hopefully we'll have time to do some hands-on exercises as well. So, so the rationale behind this is really that your data, your model decisions, parameters, and your data filtering decisions will keep on constantly changing. This is life as a data scientist. We all know this, that data scientists spend 70 to 80% of their time changing around their models, trying out different parameters, doing data filtering, data munging. While this is happening, the data also keeps on changing, which really makes it difficult. Like 6 months later, if you ask like what has changed, this becomes a very difficult question, because then, I mean, lots of things have changed. I mean, not only your code, but your data, your models, your data filtering you might be doing it differently. And so all of a sudden, if you see that your results are not what you thought you would get 6 months back, or 6 months later, you get something different, you get a different result, it's really important to know what changed. And so documenting your code and your output and all the decisions that you took in one place is really, really important. Think of it like a research notebook. And that's what we mean by a reproducible pipeline. Like anybody, for example, your collaborators or the people that you work with, might want to know exactly what changed and when, and how to rerun that analysis and get hopefully the same results. So in order to do that, one needs to build sort of like a pipeline or like a flow up, which is essentially just good programming practice. And I'll show you some case studies as well from my own experience. But really, it can be very difficult when you're deep in your work. It can be very difficult to make code pretty, commented, and make it reproducible, but you will not regret doing this, or you will regret not doing this when you sort of set aside the work for 6 months, say it's out for peer review, and then your collaborators and your reviewers ask for additional analysis or changing some assumptions and things like that, because then it's just really hard to get back to that code. And then trust me, I mean, looking at your own code 6 months later, it just appears completely unintelligible. So your code should then be ready. Essentially, you should be able to click a button and reproduce all the figures for your paper. So part of this was motivated by some work that I did in bioinformatics, looking at single cell sequencing data and bulk sequencing data for a project on inflammatory bowel disease. And so we had lots of different data coming from different collaborators, single cell sequencing from some labs, bulk sequencing from openly available data sets, another bulk sequencing from another collaborator. And the data was constantly changing, since they would do their pre-processing in some way, and then 1 month later, we would essentially have different kinds of data. So lots of things were in flux. So this is figure 1 of our paper. And at least the first 2 subplots of this figure were actually produced from a single pipeline in R. And that really helped me. Like once I started, it took a long time to set up this pipeline. But once it was set up, I was all ready to, get all this data and then process it in many ways. And this program, this pipeline was generating reports that I could show to my collaborators. It just made this collaboration and made the science much, much easier. But it was some effort upfront. And R, and especially R Studio, which is a development environment for R, makes life really, really easy for that. So for example, here's a heat map. This is figure 2 probably in the paper. And these heat maps combine data from 2 or 3 different data sources, and it's all generated in R Markdown. So for example, 1 year into my project, if anything changed in that pipeline, I could just change a single line of code, change that, and then it would generate all these figures once it was ready. You could create packages in R very, very easily. That's also doable. I'll quickly show you how to do that, but time permitting at the end. But most importantly, it's creating these R Markdown documents. So Markdown is sort of R terminology for creating these reproducible reports. And I will show you these in a second. I'll just share my screen again and show you what I mean by R Markdown. And I'll share my R Studio console here. So R Studio is a development environment for R, and essentially it makes programming in R very, very easy. All the installation instructions for installing R and R Studio are available on the GitHub repository. So just take your time to go through that. And again, I'll do some demo sessions later. So hands-on sessions, I'm happy to help you with that. But for now, just follow along. So the way to do that in R Studio is you just go to File, New File, and then R Markdown. So if you click on R Markdown, it will show you some prompts here. Just click OK. And essentially, it will create this particular template. So initially, there is some header section saying that you want the output of this document to be HTML. You can change it. Whatever text comes in here will essentially just show up in your report, just like it is. But the main chunk of the code, so any code that you want, has to be in sort of this particular notation. So the symbol R, and then open and close curly braces, and then these 3 symbols again. So you can encapsulate whatever code you want in this. And that's pretty much it. So whatever code is in this, encapsulated in this, will get run. So I can, for example, click on this button and run it. So it will run that. And this is exactly what you will end up seeing in the document. If you want to include plots also, you could do that. So for example, here is a plot of a data set that's available in R. Let's just plot that, and the plot will show up in the document like so. And you can, the way to run this entire document is just going to run and then run all. So run all will essentially run all these components, and that's pretty much it. And in order to generate the document, you go to knit, and then you say you want it in PDF. So you knit to PDF, and then you just save the PDF in a particular document, whatever that may be. So I will just save it, for example, in here, and we'll look at what document it generates in a second. So hopefully screen share is still working and you can see this particular document, but essentially it will generate a PDF document and it will save it in that folder. So that is pretty much the basics of sort of our markdown. So the essential commands are just these three symbols: open curly braces, small r, close curly braces, and then a particular r command, which will get executed, and the output of that command will be shown in the particular document that you are interested in. So let's just go back to our slides again. So that is how you sort of generate all these documents. So as I was saying, I mean, the main commands are this. So these three symbols: small r, open and close curly braces, and these three symbols again. And whatever code you put between the curly braces, what actually will get rendered in that document. If you put within these curly braces, if you put include equals false, for example, it will sort of will prevent the code and results from appearing in the finished file. Our Markdown will still run the code, but the code won't be displayed in the final document, neither the results. If you put in here echo is equal to false, it will prevent code from appearing in the document, but not the results. So this is a nice way to embed figures. And message equals false means that no messages will be generated. And you can even have figure captions. So if you write fig.cap is equal to some text in quotation marks, then it will add a figure caption to that. So essentially that's pretty much it. I mean, this is the basic of our Markdown. So essentially writing good controlled code and using this particular syntax structure. So for example, I have a simple hello world text here. So paste hello world. This is what the code is going to look like. And this is what the final document will look like when you press on net. This is what the final document will look like. So it will paste, in this case, it's showing you the code, paste hello world, and it's showing you the output as well. But in this case, for example, it's showing you not the code, but only the output. So these are the basics of R Markdown, and really sort of the trick is to use these sort of being very disciplined when you write this code and using the structure to write your code, which can be very difficult since all of us have paper deadlines. We're constantly writing papers and all of that. But the trick is if you really put this discipline up front, put the work up front, then it really pays off later. You won't see the benefits right away, but if it's a long drawn out project that's going on for 6 months, 12 months, multiple years, then it really pays off. If you are doing something one-off, like one single analysis that you will probably never do again, or something very, very one-off, it probably isn't worth your effort. But still, if you are disciplined, then it does pay off. And the concepts are same in any programming language. You will have heard of Python, for example. But really, I mean, there are ways to do that in Python as well. I'll show you a quick way. But essentially, these are like protocols. I work a lot with sort of experimental biologists, and they have protocols like lab protocols for doing different things to cells and doing experiments. So these are like protocols for computer scientists. And used really well, this becomes like a lab notebook. And this really helps you write your results and write your paper. I know of people who have written entire papers in R Markdown. So R Markdown has the code as well as your results section, your discussion, your introduction, everything written all in R. So that's a very, very powerful concept. And as I was saying, these concepts are language agnostic. So for example, if you have a Markdown document that looks like this, in Python, you could actually sort of using this particular pandoc command, you can generate documentation for that. So at this particular link, you will find you'll find a test script that shows you how to do that. So the concepts are very, very language agnostic. Please take a time to go through this repository. So this is a repository that I was talking about. For some reason, all the letters are capitalized, but just the actual repository is sort of lowercase letters. Just use lowercase letters and go to this repository, and you'll find a ton of resources to really help you navigate all of this. So I have some other demos as well. So we could do a quick hands-on. If you're just seeing online or doing this in person, just follow along, and then you can replay this video later and see. But I'll just quickly switch over to our studio again and show you this particular document. Again, you have to do some installations. If you go to that repository, you will find installation instructions for how to do that. Let me just quickly show you that. In fact, or if you're just following along, you can just go to that repository and see how to install different things. Actually, perhaps in the interest of time, I will just go into the RStudio thing anyway. So if you just go to that GitHub repository, there are step-by-step instructions on how to install our RStudio, and then in RStudio, how to install all these packages. But once you are done, you want to navigate to this particular document called rmarkdown.rmd. So RMD is the extension name for R Markdown. So once you have opened this, you can see that it has the similar format. So the section starts with a summary, which means that when I execute this document, the first section in the PDF will be summary. And this is the text that will show up there. And anything within this will get rendered as well. So in this case, it's loading a few libraries. It's loading a few libraries again, and it's loading this particular file that is again within the repository. So it's loading that. So you can see, well, if you want to visualize it in some way, you could do that here, like plot a histogram or something like that. There's an exercise that I will leave for you. Once it's loaded the data, it's splitting it into a test and training sample. And then in this case, it's so again, it's include is equals false. So it's not going to print any of this code in the document. And then in this section, perform logistic regression section. Again, this is a header that will show up in the PDF. You will see that this section performs logistic regression on this. So on the training set, it's using the training set to build a logistic regression model, and then predicting something on the test set. And it's showing you a ROC curve, a receiver operating characteristic curve, plotting those. So in this case, I've put in this particular section, I've said echo equals false. So it's not going to show you the code, but going to show you the output. And we'll see that in a minute, but I'm just walking you through the code and doing a few other funky stuff and then producing a few more plots. So let's just go to the front section again. So here is a title of the document. That is a title that you will see on the front page of the document, the name of the author, a date, and it's saying that it's going to make a PDF document in this case. So let's just go into run and click run all. So it's loading all the libraries, loading everything. And then let's see, so no code has been displayed here, no plots. But if I go here, it's plotted an AUC curve here and here, for example. Just plotted all of those. And if you want to see it in a nice shiny document, just click on knit to HTML or PDF or Word, and it will produce a report from this, which you can show to your collaborators. and your boss, and they will be super happy. I know my bosses were super happy when I did this. So hopefully screen share is still working and you can see this PDF. So this is the PDF that it will generate. It's a nice shiny report, and as I was saying, you could even write your papers in it. So going back to my slides again. So this is just try, maybe spend a few minutes and going through this on your laptop or desktop and see if you can reproduce this. Again, all the data, code, installation instructions are all on this GitHub repository. All the files are available at these links here. Just please take a few minutes to go through it. And then I think I'll spend the next few minutes sort of talking about walking you through this R Markdown that I mentioned from this case study that I mentioned. So let me just screen share again and go to our studio. So hopefully you can still see that. But then, so this is the document. So this is the single R Markdown. It's a gigantic R Markdown notebook that was used to generate most of those figures that I showed you in that plot in that paper. So again, initially there are all these commands to load different packages and plotting functions and things like that, ggplot and things like that. And then I have a bunch of flags. So for example, if it needs to run on a cluster or something like that. So these are something, for example, if I want to show a particular heat map, I've created a variable. It's set to false if I do want to show it, and true if I, set to false if I don't want to show it, and true if I want to show it. And if I want to include a particular microarray experiment, I set this particular variable to false or true, and then false if not. So there are all these different variables that I've created, and I will show you what those variables do in a second. But essentially, initially, I'm loading some of my single cell sequencing results using this particular command. It's showing you where that is, reading this particular CSV file, plotting the log fold change. It's something that's done in bioinformatics, and then doing some data munging. I'm removing some genes that are that don't meet some criteria, or selecting some genes that meet some criteria, have a particular log fold change, and then adjusted p-value less than 0.05. So it's statistically significant. So this is what I'm doing the data munging. Again, it's all done within this R Markdown document. And then if I go further along, I am pulling in more files and reading, for example, in this case, I'm reading some bulk sequencing data, reading that, providing some more column names and things like that. Again, doing more data munging. For this bulk sequencing data, I am removing certain genes and doing further data munging. It's like data filtering and data munging for data scientists. So these are all the decisions that I made. This is the final decision that I made, naturally. But earlier in the project, I might have tried a different value instead of 10 and a different value other than 1. But the good thing is that this is all documented. And it's not hard-coded anywhere. I have a variable here instead of like just a number. So I know exactly if at some point I needed to change it to, for example, 100, I could do it like this, and it's well documented. Like I know exactly what I changed. And then PCA and lots of more data filtering and data munging, and then combining different data sets still going on. So it's all within these symbols. So I know exactly. So this particular section is actually going to produce, I think, a heat map. So this is where it loads all these packages. And actually, yes, so this is the sequence, the command. There's a figure caption here. So it's showing you, it's going to show you a figure. It's going to run the commands in this section and produce a figure. And the figure caption is going to be this heat map of signature genes in risk cohort. And so here is the variable that I chose. If this particular variable way up there was set to false, then it wouldn't go in here. But if it's set to true, it would actually show a particular heat map. And same here, it's going to show a particular heat map here. And so on and so forth. This is a gigantic document that does all the data capture, data filtering, data visualization, building a machine learning model. It does all that within a single document, and it produces a gigantic report that I could constantly show to my collaborators. And that is just a very, very powerful sort of approach to do. That's just a very, very useful thing to do when you are in a large project and you are constantly working with all these different people and things are changing all the time. That's really, really important. So I have some more synthetic data sets here. So perhaps as an exercise, perhaps start with looking at this R Markdown document, running it on your computer, doing all the installations. And then I have, once you have done that, there is a single R script that I have also in this GitHub repository. So your exercise, should you choose to do it, is to really convert this simple R script into an R Markdown document. And what this does is it essentially loads some publicly available libraries and publicly available data sets and builds a very simple model to predict house prices in Boston. So I'll just quickly run the script. So you can click on source here in RStudio. And it's going to run this particular script, and it's going to build a linear model to predict house prices. And it splits it into, like, as you can see, it splits it into a training and test set, then builds a linear model. So the linear model is built using this particular command lm, and then it prints a model summary and prints diagnostics like R squared and things like that. So go through this R Markdown document, try to run it, try to install R and RStudio and all that. And then once you're done with that, spend a few minutes trying to convert this R script into an R Markdown. And again, it's basically just following along this particular structure. So have an initial header file, header text like this, some text that like this, for example, which will show up in the document, and then using these particular commands, or in this case, using a command like this, R echo is equal to false, and just convert this simple project script into an R Markdown. So this is just an exercise to get you started in R. So switching over to the slides again. If I go over to the slide, so that's exercises with synthetic data. Again, one can also build sort of R Shiny interfaces. So this is like building graphical user interfaces in R. I'll show that to you in a very, very quickly. But once you have done this synthetic data, please take some time to go through this code here. And what this means is you can build very simple graphical user interfaces that your collaborators can use. So let me show you a quick example again in RStudio. If you go right here, if you go to File, New File, and if you click on Shiny Web App, just give a certain name and then create. So what it's going to do is it's going to create a simple file like this, and it has a server and a client. So a server essentially is waiting for a client to give an input, and then the server produces a plot next to that. So in this case, the server is sort of plotting something, plotting the histogram of a data set, and the client is generating some input. So the way to run this is to click on Run App like this. And then hopefully screen share is still working, and you can see a very nice graphical user interface like this, where it's plotting, showing the old faithful geyser data. You can change the number of bins, and as you can see, the histogram is getting changed based on the number of bins that you show. So this is the client, and this is the server. And you can encapsulate, you can build very, very easily, you can build graphical user interfaces that your collaborators can use to essentially play around with your data. And you can also, if you click on publish, you can very easily publish this interface on a web server. So all examples are again shown on the GitHub repository. And if you go back to this particular slide, I've shown you how to create this at this web server. You can see a very simple graphical user interface that I essentially created with just 2 or 3 clicks. So that is how easy RStudio makes it to create these graphical user interfaces. So again, let's spend the next few minutes going through that R Markdown document, doing some exercises in converting that R script into an R Markdown. And again, all this code, all the resources, templates, synthetic data, installation instructions are available on this particular GitHub repository. Please take your time to go through that. And thank you so much again for your time.